physically fit and mentally agile. Is there any genetic reasons for this, or you simply take your health care very seriously?
Well, if I don't feel well, I try to find out why and do something about it. But I'm not a health fanatic. I don't jog. I find when I see people jogging, they look ridiculous. I believe one gets enough exercise, just normal locomotion in the pursuit of one's normal activities. And of course, from time to time, I go into the bush to get away from people, really, not for the purpose of exercise. So I have no idea. It's just luck, mainly luck.
But when elders get as old as you are, the tendency is to move closer to God, either because they are afraid of death or they just want to make heaven. Reading some portions of your memoir, You Must Set Forth at Dawn, where you describe feelingly the death of your friends and a place already designated for your burial. I thought I should ask you for your reflections on death. What does death mean to you, and why are you not afraid of it at all?
Well, I don't know that I've ever been... let's put it this way. I think it's a very rare kind of humanity which doesn't look at death as an unpleasant event. But the moment you think about that, and you say, in any case, I won't be around to experience it. And that's basically is my attitude regarding death, that it's other people, unfortunately, who feel death, not the person who actually dies. So that takes the burden off my shoulders, and I just carry on with life as it is. And in any case, when one has lost so many friends, so many dear colleagues and acquaintances, even younger than you, what business do you have thinking you're exempt? So it's a question of it'll happen, and therefore I take it practically, and I've designated where I would like to be buried.
So I have a follow-up to that, sir. Do you believe in life after life?
No, I do not. It all ends, when you enter that hole. That's it.
So what do you think of people who think that they need to do certain things to make heaven?
Well, I think I don't want to discourage them in their belief. See, I'm not a religious fanatic one way or the other. If it makes people comfortable and encourages them to, shall we say, lead an ethical life, since they believe in heaven, then by all means. But that kind of religion in which the followers are made to believe that by destroying those who do not believe in their path towards what they call heaven or paradise, that they've got to be killed, and that earns them credit in quote-unquote paradise. I think they are verminous. They're verminous individuals, and they don't belong to the human community. In other words, let each individual stay attached to his or her set of beliefs, but not at the expense of bringing others faster to their sense of paradise or hell, simply because they're not following your own path. This is what is dangerous about religion. This is where I really get my hackles up about religion. Religion is a very private matter. Spirituality is a very private matter. Two different things, by the way. And if people believe that it's important for them to believe in an afterlife to carry out their humanistic mission in life, then by all means, I have nothing against religion. But those who think it's an insurance to do good in order to attain paradise, I think they are delusionists, self-delusionists.
let's get this right. Are you a traditional religionist or an atheist?
I believe that all religions are equal. All religions are equal, as long as they serve humanity. If they don't, then they're not truly religious, because spirituality is an inner thing which becomes organized into what we call religion, whether Christianity, Zoroastrianism, Orisha worship, or anything at all. And ultimately, spiritual is what? Religion is something which is internalized and should become personal. Now, because of that, I find Orisha, their religion, filled with metaphors. As a writer, as a mythopoet, I find religions like Hinduism, for instance, Orisha worship, as I said, they're so full of metaphors, so rich. Another reason why I prefer Orisha worship to others is that Orisha religion gives you, I'm a Democrat, I'm a passionate, I believe very much in democracy. Simply because it's the most rational means of governance. It's the best way of living harmoniously together across differences. Each individual is treated within the democracy. Ideally, it is not sham democracy, but each individual is regarded as more than a mere statistic, over which a few individuals who consider themselves chosen, Lord, the Lord exists, they dictate what you should do, what you should believe, what you should wear. The Orisha allows you to find your own path to the supreme deity, to believe in the supreme deity. Within the same family, you can have the father following Shango worship, the mother a different way. The child is born and the Babalawo says, oh, this is a child of Orisha. Within that same building, that same household, there are people, different paths to Godhead, different paths to their inner satisfaction, to their encapsulation of what they think exists beyond the physical individual, the physical person. Each individual finds his or her own way. Along the way, something might happen to that individual in real life, and goes to the Babalawo, says, maybe there was a mistake, try this other path. And that's it. There's no quarrel, you know. The wife doesn't say, I won't cook for you because you are following a shopana or I'm not following the issue or whatever. No, nothing. It's total harmony. And believe me, that is what existence should be primarily about. The harmonization of differences.
Would you say that your childhood spent in a very exciting, if not tempestuous, environment of political activism in a home of a headmaster, that's your father, and a trader, your mother, who treated their fellow human beings well and lived an incredible life of service to their community, helped to mold you as an anti-establishment humanist who lives by egalitarian ethos?
Well, that word anti-establishment, it's rather strong. What does it set out? One doesn't set out to be anti-establishment. It is true that there are different degrees of individualist consciousness and individualist assertion. In relation to what I was saying earlier, in that sense, I am I have a very heightened individualist sensibility. In other words, I cannot treat faces as just particles in a congealment, in a human congealment. No, every individual is distinct. And the assertion of that distinction cannot be at the expense of another individualist entity. That is also part of the democracy, that you express your being totally, but you make sure that that space does not encroach on another individual. And so if I seem to be anti-establishment, it isn't as a principle, it isn't as a philosophy. I'm just against what attempts, what moves to treat human beings as just part of a mass and nothing else. So in the process of that self-expression, I definitely consider any kind of organism, such as establishment, as an enemy of society if it acts in a way, if it enacts policies which are against the expression, the self-expression of individuals in societies, within the limitations which I outlined earlier. And what I find, and so any kind of attempt to have conformist thinking in society, for me, is just the surest cut to exercising undue, illegal authority over members of society. Many people, when they want to speak about, shall we say, the most conformist aspect of society, they talk about the civil service, the civil servant, that don't behave like a civil servant. That means don't just go. According to the general orders, you know, there used to be this fat companion, GU, you know. No, for heaven's sake, think individually, and you might even improve, you might even correct certain basic anomalies within the establishment. So it isn't that I set out to be anti-establishment. It's just that I find that very often establishment is anti-humanity. That's where the fight begins. You talked about my parents. They didn't. They weren't anti-establishment. They were anti-authoritarianism. That's why my mother took part. Was one of the lieutenants of Mrs. Kunle Ajibade when they rose against feudalism, the feudalist conduct of the Ake Abeokuta then and his Akoda, his police, in collaboration with the European district officer, you know, who was of course exerting the imperial will. And they rose against that kind of authoritarianism. And on behalf of something, not so much anti-something, but on behalf of the oppressed women of Egbaland. That is what happened. And by listening to the conversation, by in fact even indirectly participating as a messenger between the different women groups, you know, carrying messages and, you know, enjoying myself, you know, thoroughly. I thought it was very exciting when they rose against the Ake Abeokuta. Day after day, they kept up the siege. They were threatened, they were bullied, they were harassed. They said, no, this unjust tax must go. So if that's anti-establishment, yeah, that's okay.
And you played the role of a messenger, you know, carrying messages, you know.
Yes, between the women. Igbe, where the leader, and the women in Ake, and then those marching from Ikorodu. There was little, but everybody ignored me. So it was a little messy.
Talking about individual, you know, energies and what, you know, they could do, what individuals could do when they are really creative, you know. I was just thinking that there was this group of students who came to you and said that, oh, they would like to be like Wole Soyinka. And you said to them, why don't you try and be yourself? And a lot of people were saying, oh, why would Wole Soyinka say that to, you know, secondary school students? And we were saying to them, why will he not?
Yeah, people get terrified when youths are told, you know, be yourself. You know. And then a statement which I made at the time was also, as usual, you know, Nigerians, we will talk about that subject later on. I always like to take the path which gives them outlets for some kind of inner preconceived aggression, you know, idea, which of course enables the aggressive part of them. I said, there's only one Wole Soyinka. Meaning, and I went on to say, there's only one you, there's only one there's only one her, she, etc., etc. But they say, I actually had a letter, I couldn't believe this, that Nigerians, they tire me sometimes. I said, I never believed that you would say that. You think that there can never be another Wole Soyinka. I said, what do you use for your head? I have a letter, I have it somewhere. They're so disappointed that I was so self-centered that I felt there could not be another Wole Soyinka. I teach. What do I do when I teach in school? I'm teaching them to be even greater Wole Soyinkas.
Precisely.
And somebody writes that kind of rubbish. But anyway, that's another story. May come to it as we proceed.
So, who are the other earliest influences on your life, apart from S.A. and the white Christians?
There were my other relations, like my granduncle, Reverend Ake Abeokuta. Then there were teachers, whose idiosyncrasies I studied and enjoyed, like all of you, I'm sure you've done. These are nicknames. But like one scout master, for instance, whose name eludes me now, I liked his precision. I liked his sense of order, so that, in fact, for me, it is this tension which generates that eventual equilibrium which we all strive to obtain in our lives. Orderly, disciplined, and absorb that sense of order, sense of discipline. But then the sense of order and discipline often makes demands on one's individualism. And it's the arbitration, your personal arbitration between those two polarities that create the individual personality. So people look at artists and say, oh yes, individualist characters, bohemians, they don't comb their hair, they don't change their shoes, etc. They just live wildly, etc., etc. No, that individualism also operates against the template of an inner discipline. So that's why it's important to mention that Scoutmaster, who was an influence in my life, that sense of discipline which I have, both from my father, who was a great disciplinarian, and from some of his colleagues like that.
Sir, what were those things in your background that showed that you would go the literary way? What were those other things in your background that made you go the literary way?
Oh, I was just from reading. I was a voracious reader as a child.
Okay.
I was fascinated by books, by print, by the printed word. I remember in those early days, the very early newspapers, like Ake Abeokuta, then there was an Egba journal, which I can't remember now. Whether it's Yoruba or English, I read everything. And the books in my father's library, I consumed very early. And so from that, I think at one stage or the other, one never knows, began to say, no, this character shouldn't have gone that way. No, why didn't that character go this way? That's why he ended up in disaster. And so I think the habit began of my never really reading what was down, but recomposing as I went along. And from the theme itself went expressions, just expressions. I would have used this one. I think that it's that process that leads to, I'm just fascinated by the written word. I think that's where it all started.
What were some of those books you read?
Oh, I remember Charles Dickens very clearly. There was a Greek play which made an impression on the language, Medea. Euripides, I've never forgotten that novella because the language was so terse, so muscular, the passion of this woman who was betrayed, Medea, by Jason, and her terrible revenge, which is horrendous. And I say, how could a woman feel so bitter as to destroy her children in order to destroy the man? See, these complexities of human relationship, which I saw in books and which in some instances I also saw reflected around me, that after all, these books were real. Yes, they were fiction, but they were real in the sense that you identified not just individuals, but sometimes you saw archetypal creations in those works.
So, but why you mentioned about your parents and the other influences not being anti-establishment but anti-authoritarian?
No, I never said it was anti-establishment.
They weren't anti.
No, they weren't. That's what I said. I was explaining what they were against. Oppressive establishment. Oppressive.
Now, wasn't there a way to think about an alternative means of rather than work from without the establishment and rather getting to influence some of the things they want, the change they wanted?
Remember that many areas of establishment, school itself is an establishment, and I consider myself a teacher. So in a sense, I'm also part of the establishment. And then I've created things all along. Institutions which involve other people, but I prefer to do it my own way. Take an example, the Road Safety Corps, right?
Yeah.
I created it. It was an establishment. It was created outside, shall we say, the police establishment. Sure. The greatest disaster that ever came to the Road Safety Corps was when it was merged with the police. I wanted an establishment which was partly, in fact, mostly civilian. Remember, the Road Safety Corps was based on special marshals, volunteer special marshals. This included judges, journalists that had their own chapter, trade unionists had their own chapter. It's just a small fraction that constituted the uniformed part. It was voluntary to go on the roads and so on. So, for me, this was an improvement on at least the traffic duties of the police. So, even though there was a collaboration, even though it was part of the overall establishment, you could say that this was anti-establishment. This was making the citizens police themselves rather than be at the behest of what you carry. But of course, some people came in and merged with the police, ruined them. By the time they were extracted, they picked up all the bad habits. But when the Road Safety Corps was the Road Safety Corps, the fear of the Road Safety Corps was the beginning of wisdom for all road users.
Maja.
No, we hated that name. We called it Bekude.
Oh yeah,
that was Bekude.
Those drivers were calling them Maja.
Yes. Because the pioneer was Oyo State. And Jenbe gave the logo of the Greyhound. No, it was a soldier. So the idea was pouncing, aggression. Whereas we said Bekude. That was the real name, Bekude. Arrest death on the road.
Now, your mother always admonished you as a child that your overconfidence will kill you one day. Can you recall some instances when your stubborn exuberance or pranks, truly justified our worries?
Not once. She was very unfair. In those areas, I always felt that my ideas, especially since I was ready to undergo rigorous tests of such ideas, even when very risky to my health, my survival. Ideas which can be justified trying them out. And when a child tries out something which people believe should be that even adults should undertake with great caution. Then they feel that child is overconfident and is going to destroy himself or herself. So it was an even thing throughout many instances. I'll tell you some of them. But I think it stemmed from the fact that, if I think about it, if I'm capable of thinking about this, that is possible, then I should be ready to test it. That included even the sciences, which I hated eventually, but the practical side of sciences, I love being in the laboratories. And at home, I used to perform experiments. So things like that, you know, someone would blow up in my face. And so activities like that, you know, like my mother's shop, for instance. I would come and I would say, this. I hated selling and buying, but I would say, okay, take a walk. I'll rearrange the shop. Or I wouldn't even tell her. By the time she comes back, I'll totally rearrange the shop. Because I feel that's the best to look at. Look at customers. I've studied them. I said, no, this will attract them more. So she'll give up and let me have my way. After I've gone back to school, the children back.
What about the gun accident?
The gun accident? Oh, yes. Well, again, that's curiosity. I used to go with my father when he hunted. It was an air gun, by the way. No, good for squirrels, oderekoko, the brown pigeon, the wild pigeon, and the occasional rabbit, I think we got. And I was curious about the functioning, you know, this and take a shot. So I sat in the front room one day, waiting for him to come out of his bedroom so I could accompany him. And looking at that, it's something in that area which you used to pull, you know. But he knew it was his fault, so he never chided. You know, he knew he should not have left that unloaded. And he knew me enough to know that I learned that lesson, and I didn't need to be. So there was a sort of mutual standoff. I wasn't rebuked, but he knew I would never do it again.
I see. Now you went to Government College, Ibadan, at a tender age of 10, you know, going to 11,
10 and a half.
on scholarship. How did you cope with the older boys? You know, in those days, they were always, you know, going to school very old and all that. Can you share with us some of your memorable experiences in GCI?
Those schoolmates of mine, they were bullies. They were terrible because they were big. Some of them, I'm sure, had children already. Some had moustache. I'm sure they shaved every morning. And then what my mother used to say is overconfidence. But me, I didn't see because they were big, therefore they should trample over me. And so I had no hesitation in taking them on. So it was very good training, you know, because you defeat people like that largely with moral persistence, because they were bullies and they knew they were misusing their power. And when it got too much, occasionally when it got too much, because there were three of us who were really small. There was Christopher Collade, myself, and I think Mishida was the third. Anyway, when the bullying, you know, got a bit too intense, because these big boys could not stand the idea that this Rondo was standing up to them while others were. So I couldn't stand it. So it intensified the bullying, which made me even more aggressive. So I must confess that sometimes I was responsible for bringing disaster on my head because I would tease them. The names they didn't like to be called, call them the name, and then take off full speed. So anyway, it got too much. I called Christopher, and yes, I think they should have. I said, you know, let's form a tripartite alliance. Anytime any of us is bullied, the rest of us will come to the rescue of the others. And that's what we did. So we tried to move together as much as possible, and it wasn't one that attacked the others, to the rescue. And that diminished, reduced. But I remember one particular individual, the notion that now these three are ganging up against us, he couldn't stand it. So while the others backed off, you know, this individual, I remember him very well. he just became more and more aggressive, more and more aggressive. And he somehow